SEC administrators, coaches, leadership, all debating the 8 versus 9 game schedule. It begs the question, Josh, are SEC coaches soft? We'll discuss on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon in 94.7 The Ref in Norman. Josh, SEC meetings are happening right now down in Destin, Florida. Hey, if you haven't been to Destin, it's a pretty place, a good place to have some meetings, maybe hit the beach up a little bit. But they're discussing, the biggest issue they're discussing is what to do with the schedule when Oklahoma and Texas officially join the conference July 1st of 2024 for the 2024 football season. Now, it looked like for quite some time that the schedule choice gaining the most steam was a 9-game conference schedule. The SEC for many years has played an 8-game conference schedule and then 4 non-conference games, allowing them to kind of load up on some weaker opponents here and there. But in recent years, it seems like they've taken on a more aggressive approach to their non-conference scheduling. But Josh, where do you stand? I know if you're an everydayer, you've been listening to the show for quite some time. You know where we stand on this. We like the idea of a 9-game conference schedule, but so we're a bit disappointed that it's taken a backslide right now.
The final news that Oklahoma and Texas had orchestrated their buyout to the SEC. Do you remember what the buzz was the week or two prior?
No, I don't.
The buzz was from Brett McMurphy and from a bunch of national reporters. This buyout, we thought that there was going to be one more year in the Big 12, but momentum has stalled, right? Momentum has stalled that there's 1 year left in the Big 12 for an early exit for Oklahoma and Texas. And what happened? Very, very quickly, there was a deal struck shortly after that. The exit fee, everything, all of the money's taken care of for Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC. So I say that to say this here. I do believe there's a little bit of public posturing from Greg Sankey of the SEC, from presidents, from athletic directors. They want the power brokers that be at ESPN to believe very seriously that they're content to stay put at 8 conference games, because guess what? As I'm reading here, ironically enough, from ESPN, resolution could be difficult as schools appear split on which scheduling formula is most beneficial. Issues of bowl eligibility, competitive balance, and the most important part, John, television revenue expected to be a part of the conversation. So to me, I do wonder if this is a little bit of a bargaining chip for SEC power brokers. And but if it's not that, John, then I would describe myself as very, very disappointed that momentum is heading the opposite direction from 9 to 8, because frankly, anybody listening, watching here on Locked On Sooners, you lose if they choose to play 8 conference games versus 9. You, the viewer, deserve more good inventory and less cupcake games. And unfortunately, it sounds like cupcakes just might still be on the menu.
And it also limits the potential for building new rivalries in the SEC. If you're only playing their one permanent rival, which we know will be Texas, that's not going to change. Oklahoma will play Texas every single year. Now it's just a matter of, okay, who are the other teams that they're going to play regularly? Well, if you're not going to play a 9-game conference schedule and you only have one permanent opponent, then you're going to be rotating the other 15 teams. And so you're not going to see them maybe as regularly as you'd like, or as regularly as you need to start building that rivalry back, or building some, I don't know how to put it, just more tension, I guess. If you're not playing Missouri every year, yes, Missouri isn't a traditional rival, but you've got tradition with that program. You've got nearly 100 games of history with that program. If you're not playing them every year, think about Texas and Texas A&M. If those two aren't playing every year, it really is a missed opportunity for the conference. I really hope that your kind of theory on this, that it's posturing, is accurate, because everything made sense when they talked about a 9-game schedule. When you play 3 permanent opponents and then you play a rotation of the other 6, but you're going to see everybody at least, every 4 years in your home. Like, even if you don't play Georgia the first couple years you're in the SEC, well, you know what? You're going to host them year 3 or year 4. So you're not going to go 7-8 years without having the Bulldogs or the Crimson Tide or the Tigers in Norman. That's what the beauty of the 9-game schedule is that you're going to see these teams on a regular basis and build familiarity with them and their fan bases, and the fan bases with your town as well. Like, that's some of the beauty of college football, is the travel aspect, going to away games, going to visit places. You want SEC teams to become familiar with Norman, with Austin, getting that exposure and starting to kind of build that camaraderie a little bit as a program or as a conference. So I do hope that it is posturing. Who better to posture than Nick Saban, the guy that is kind of the quote unquote unofficial voice of college football because of the success that he's had. If he's kind of changed his tune from somebody who was very much a proponent of a 9-game schedule to an 8-game schedule, it does carry weight. At the same time, again, I hope it is posturing, because the SEC stands to benefit a lot by having the 9-game conference schedule, just from an inventory perspective, like you discussed, but also from a building perspective. As we build this conference to 16 teams, begin building new matchups, new storylines, all that stuff, you want to be able to play those things regularly. And if you're only seeing teams potentially, maybe you can see them as frequently, but the scheduling is just going to be a little bit different, I guess.
So I'm trying to just even wrap my mind around if you play 8 games and you've got 16 in the league, and what is it? It's 7-team divisions right now. Are we just then, under that scenario, are we still just sticking 2 divisions? And really, under that scenario, would it then be you play your division and 1 non-division opponent, and that's your schedule if you stick with 8 games? How would this format work if it is indeed 8?
I don't know if divisions are being discussed. I think it's still more of the open world format where you just kind of play everybody. But again, how that breaks down, I'm not exactly sure. If you play, okay, you got Texas, and then you need, 7 more opponents on your, non-conference schedule. Well, then, okay, say you play Group A, year 1 and 2, and then that leaves 8 SEC opponents left to play. Does the math work out? No, the math doesn't quite work out, because you still have, there's going to be 8 teams left over that you got to figure out in, years 3 and year 4, and somebody's going to get pushed to year 5 and 6 that you might not see, but every, 5 or 6 years. Now that one team that kind of gets hung out there in the balance, that'll probably shift after that point. You see in year 5 and 6, maybe then after the schedule kind of comes back through, you see them years 8 and 9 after that. So I don't know, or 9 and 10. God bless the person that's going to have to put all that together, because that is not going to be an easy task. But I think what it comes down to is the 9-game just made so much more sense from a symmetry standpoint. It was simpler. I think it allowed everybody to plan a little bit easier, but I don't know. It'll be fun regardless. It's going to be a lot of fun, but I do think we do miss out a little bit if they go to 8 versus 9.
And I would say this too. If truly this is, just in closing here on this subject, if this is financial posturing from the SEC toward ESPN, I would say this to the ESPN exec, that for whatever reason, trying to get the lay of the land, wants to know what Locked On Sooners thinks about it. Sweeten the pot. Don't make this mistake, because ultimately you're going to come away, I think, if you sweeten the pot now and you don't wait until later, if you're ESPN, it's kind of like you look across sports deals, NFL contracts. If you get in the door early, guess what? You did it with the ACC. It winds up being a cheap contract later. So if you're ESPN right now and you sweeten the pot in this particular instance, well, what are you going to do, John? Number one, you're going to get better TV matchups. Okay. You're not going to have to wait for a lot of these games to be played. So your inventory itself, year in and year out, is going to be better. You're going to have better ratings. You're going to make more money. And ultimately, you're probably going to pay less to do so. So if you're an ESPN exec, don't make the mistake on this deal. Pony up now. Don't pony up later.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happens in the NFL. If you wait to pay somebody, you end up just paying them more. So it's gonna be interesting to follow. They're hoping to come into a decision on the scheduling aspect this week. Oklahoma and Texas don't get a vote on it because they're not full members until the 2024 season. So they're still a couple years off from being able to have much say in the way that SEC scheduling looks. And so it's going to be really interesting to find out. All this really comes down to is, and in a way, some of it's money, some of it is security a little bit for the SEC. Fewer games against SEC opponents means more opportunities to win games, potentially, and potentially more opportunities to make a bowl game. And although bowls don't really mean much in the big scheme of things for coaches, for athletic departments, that bowl means revenue. It means money. And missing out on a bowl means you miss out on money. And if coaches are missing out on money, coaches aren't going to be able to stick around for very long at said program. So there is definitely some, financial incentive for some of your, middling programs, so to speak, some of the programs that are generally in the middle that are fighting for bowl eligibility, teams such as Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi State, South Carolina, 4 programs who, according to Brandon Marcello of 247 Sports, oppose a 9-game schedule. You're talking about, Alabama. Alabama's Alabama. They're going to be bowl eligible. The time I start worrying about Alabama contending for the college football playoff, the SEC, is when Nick Saban retires and moves on to something else. But for the foreseeable future, they're going to be a college football playoff contender. Alabama opposing the 9-game schedule, it could be for a lot of reasons. Some of it coming down to traditional rivalries as well. But those other teams opposing it, I can kind of see where they're coming from. At the same time, as we discussed, Josh, just be better.
There's so many bowl games. You still, under this scenario, would have 3 non-conference games. And really, even if you schedule one good opponent that's, say your Clemson, South Carolina game or your Florida State game, you can have 2 total cakewalk games. So to stop it with the idea that it's difficult to get to 6 wins. If you're good, it ain't that difficult to get to 6 wins. And now, John, 5 wins in some instances, you get sent to a bowl game. So stop it with this idea that it's difficult to get bowl eligible. It's not. It's coaches being cowards, and it's time to just end that way of thinking. Stop it. People, ultimately you're going to hurt college football, and you're going to hurt the product going forward, because eventually networks are going to say, you know what, we want better games.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. ESPN, I mean, yeah, the money doesn't mean everything, and Greg Sankey even said as much. It's like, if all you're doing is chasing money, then you end up potentially making mistakes. But the SEC has been at the forefront of college football for quite some time. They'll continue to be at the forefront of college football. It's just a matter of getting everybody on the same page. And I still think that he's very much a proponent of the 9-game schedule. And if Greg Sankey is as good a commissioner as everybody seems to think he is, he'll get everybody on board by the time it's all said and done. And this will be a 9-game schedule. Just real quickly, I was just kind of doing the, looking at how a schedule could work out real quickly while we're, discussing, and yes, one team would get left out of the, actually, no, it would work out just perfectly, actually. that if you play Texas every year, and I mean, there's still 14 teams for you to break up evenly. So even though the 3-6 thing works out pretty well symmetry, the 1-7 still works out pretty well, that you'll see everybody every other year. So I just wanted to clear that up, clarify that, because earlier I definitely said that the wrong way, but you would see everybody every 4 years at the very least. So, whether you play, if you play Alabama year 1 and 2, you won't see them for year 3 and 4, but then you'll see them back again 5 and 6. So it would work out fairly well, but still you get shorted one SEC conference game, which I think means a lot. Josh, a few more things that we'll touch on. We got a big DL announcement coming to Norman as far as setting a official visit. We'll discuss that. Baseball getting selected to the NCAA tournament. Had a bunch of D1Softball All-American selections, and Oklahoma still looks like they're chasing defensive line help. But first, let's talk to our friends about FanDuel, Josh.
Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. That's because right now, for the NBA Finals, new customers, a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That is no sweat first bet for new customers up to $2,500. There's no better place to bet all of the playoff action than America's #1 sports book. You can check them out, FanDuel.com/lockedon, to get that no sweat first bet up to $2,500. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, where the early odds, just for those curious, and I think they've got it right. Miami, to me, a legitimate underdog in this series, though. And look, they're an 8 seed that's gotten here now to the NBA Finals. Haven't looked like that throughout these NBA playoffs, but it is all Denver in terms of the money line to win this series. Denver minus 390. So if you believe Miami's winning this NBA Finals, plus 310, not too shabby. Again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Williams Nwaneri. We've been monitoring this for some time, and I don't know that this is surprising news to a lot of us that have been following this recruitment for 5-star defensive lineman Williams Nwaneri, but now we have it, no pun intended, set in stone, baby, in this recruiting class, what his official visit calendar looks like, John.
Yeah, he's going to be coming to Norman the first weekend of June, or the first full weekend of June. What is that? June doing bad radio here. It's June 9th through the 11th. So he's not going to be coming for the Champion Barbecue, but hoping to get a little bit more intimate time with the Oklahoma Sooners coaching staff. And I mean, this is a huge recruitment. The Sooners are crystal ball, future cast, on through predictions. Based on all that, they're the favorites right now for Nwaneri. But you still got to close. You still got to finish, and you got to get him signed. So there's a lot of recruitment still to go. He's being heavily recruited by Tennessee and Miami, Oregon. I mean, all the heavy hitters in college football are coming after this kid as well. And Missouri, the in-state school, is going to have a chance to land him as well. So it's not over till it's over. But to get him in prior to the Champion Barbecue, I do think that could resonate with a kid of this ilk. But again, you've got some inside access to him a little bit through, Caden Green being a high school teammate of his. So he's got a little bit of an insight into what the program's about. Green just spending his first semester with the Sooners this spring. So I think all eyes are going to be on Norman for, that weekend in which he's there visiting Oklahoma for an official visit, because it's one of the more high profile recruitments, and of any position group, that's the big storyline in the 2024 recruiting cycle, is what does Oklahoma do and how successful are they recruiting the defensive line in this cycle, because they're kind of going for broke here with Nwaneri. David Stone's set to be there for the Champion Barbecue, and, Joseph Jonah Ajonye, they missed out on Zadavian Sims, but Nigel Smith is also, one of the better defensive line prospects in the country as well, that they're heavily trending for. So a lot of good options for them, but they got to hit them. They got to win these commitments. They got to get these signings. It's still going to be something that we're going to have to follow for the next 7 months for sure.
It's a busy slate of June visits for Williams Nwaneri, just, start to finish throughout this month for Nwaneri. It goes like this. It'll be Georgia this weekend, and then Oklahoma, obviously, as we told you, the following, then off to Tennessee, and then the hometown visit there for the Lee Summit product to Missouri, and then the final official visit scheduled for September for Oregon. So would be good news in this recruitment, John, if you could blow it out of the water right here, right now this summer. Then maybe you get, an unofficial during the season itself. That would, of course, be a great sign if there's a return trip in season for Nwaneri to Oklahoma. How do you feel before, after the Georgia visit, sandwich in between a couple of, future SEC foes, Georgia, Tennessee, and then Missouri at the tail end of that as well? I mean, do you have a preference in terms of the timeline for Nwaneri's visit? Is it advantageous to Oklahoma? Does it not matter? Where do you stand with that?
I would like it to be last, but it's not going to be. At the same time, if they are able to get them on campus for a game day experience during the fall, then where the official visit is this summer doesn't matter as much, because they're going to get time with him in the fall. And I imagine they will. I mean, Lee Summit's not that far away. Like, that's a road trip. They're not having, the family's not having to break the bank, book flights, get everybody, book hotels, do all that. And that could potentially be a day trip if they wanted it to be, or at least just a one-nighter in Norman to go to a game day experience. So it doesn't matter to me as much, considering it's more of a quote unquote local recruitment or regional recruitment. But for sure, you'd like to be the last voice that he hears as he decides to make a decision. But based on everything that we've heard from everybody, whether it's Parker Thune or John Garcia or Brian Smith, all these recruiting analysts, they think that this is going to be a recruitment that just continues on until signing day. And so what we hear now, I mean, yes, it's encouraging where Oklahoma stands, but still there's a long way to go in this battle, that anything could happen. And I mean, we know Oregon, like Dan Lanning, he's pulling his weight. Like, he's pulling guys up to, Oregon. He's pulling them. He's got the gravity based on his recent history of success. And Brent Venables right now, he doesn't kind of have that. Like, his national championships are quite some time away now, relative to Dan Lanning's. And the 6 and 7 season puts a little bit of a damper on some of that, when Dan Lanning had a successful season in his first year up at Oregon. But all that could change, after one, if Oklahoma goes out and has a really good year this year, everybody's going to start feeling better about what they're building in Norman, as opposed to being concerned about the 6 and 7. They'll start thinking, okay, things are on the right track. They're heading in the right direction as they go to the SEC. So I don't have to worry so much about that. So that's kind of where I stand on it, Josh. I think, again, it's too early to tell, but at least you're in a favorable spot as he goes into these visits.
Well, and too bad we have to put all of our ducks into the basket of the Colorado Buffaloes that weekend for that visit, because the transfer portal overhaul, it's exciting. Dion's there, but I don't think Colorado's going to be any good. So I think that will be a big time performance for Oregon that weekend. Unfortunately, it just on the gridiron itself.
Yep. We're going to talk about Built Bar here in a second, but then we'll go into some Diamond talk as well. First, let me talk to you about our friends over at Built Bar. Best tasting protein bar ever. It tastes great. It's great for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, great flavors like cookies and cream, coconut brownie chunk. My favorite, the peanut butter brownie, mint brownie. So many good options for you to get a meal replacement, pre-workout, post-workout, or if you just want a snack that's not going to kill you calorically. It's not going to give you all the sugar that you might get from a candy bar, but it's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. So go check it out. Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15. Locked15, get 15% off your next order over at built.com. All right, Josh, a few more nuggets we're going to touch on. Before we get to Diamond Talk, let's talk about this real quick. The Sooners offered a defensive lineman out of Utah State, out of the Mountain West Conference, named Stephen Paya. I'm going to butcher it, and I apologize for that. But originally a signee of Michigan, just played a few games there for the Wolverines before transferring to Utah State for the 2021 season, where he helped them win a Mountain West Conference championship. And then this past year, just played 3 games before tearing his ACL, was a starter for the Aggies up there. And not really a lot of production statistically, but you look at what maybe he was asked to do along the defensive line. Potentially, this is a guy that can come in and be a nose tackle type, one, technique defensive tackle type for you and just plug holes.
Philip Paya, by the way.
Thank you, Josh.
Per the Utah State Aggies official bio. So that is the pronunciation. Paya, Philip Paya. 6'4", 305, like you said, run stuffer, which Oklahoma, John, they're going to welcome every single body type they can find like that, as obviously OU's in the process of, signing players like this and then in-house development year over year over year, but probably Oklahoma could use a little bit of immediate plug and play help or plug and play depth. So, hey, I'm all for it. Yeah, you get an opportunity to beef up the defensive line a little bit. I think that's crazy enough because of the problems that you've had in the defensive backfield. But with Bowen coming in and with Pearson that you've added, and with Bowman a year older, some of the things going on in the defensive backfield, okay, feel pretty good there. Linebacker went and got McCullough. You saw what Stutzman did a season ago, and he figures to be 1 year better. We'll see about Kanik or others progressing there. So linebacker, I think people feel fairly positive about. Cheetah, I guess, instead of just calling it linebacker, Cheetah with McCullough. And I see your comments before you leave them for us. Justin Harrington at Cheetah. So feel okay about that right now. But defensive line is probably the area where Oklahoma fans, and particularly defensive tackle, maybe are most uneasy. So with all of that being said, help. Yes, bring it on down.
And I think we like the progression that Jordan Kelly and Isaiah Coe have made so far in their career, but nobody's kind of taken that step to becoming an elite player yet. And so you do want to add depth. So you have some rotational bodies to spell these guys so they're not getting gassed, but you hope that one of these dudes takes a step and becomes a really, really good player or an elite player that helps you solidify your defensive line, because defensive tackle has kind of been an issue for quite some time now, not just last year, but in years past as well. Even though you had really good players in a Perion Winfrey or Neville Gallimore, it never was this situation where you felt like, okay, Oklahoma's going to stop the run, no problem. They've got the run stuffers up there. Nobody's going to be able to run inside. It's like, okay, anytime you want to run inside, you're pretty much going to be able to, just based on what Alex Grinch was trying to do. And now Brent Venables trying to transition away from that. So it's just a matter of time and building that defensive tackle depth up a little bit, and then adding run stuffers just like Paya here as well. So that's an important potential offer to follow. Just offered over, late last week, early in the weekend. So we'll keep track of that here on Locked On Sooners. A few quick notes here. Oklahoma baseball makes the NCAA tournament. Josh, your level of surprise on a scale of 0 to 10.
Oh, I think, on the lesser of the surprise scale. So probably 3. It felt like Oklahoma, because of what they did to end the season, because of where their RPI was at, the win. If you went 2-Q in the Big 12 tournament, I think they would have flip-flopped Oklahoma and Kansas State. And K-State fans, of course, have a legitimate gripe, because guess what? They took it to Oklahoma when the two teams played, but the RPI was in Oklahoma's favor. And Oklahoma got a nice win over Oklahoma State to open the Big 12 tournament. So with all of those factors at play, it seemed like OU had a pretty good little case for an at-large bid. And obviously that's how it played out with the committee. So they get to go to a familiar state for their postseason. Seems like Oklahoma has been in the state of Virginia a bunch, all of these recent postseason trips.
Yeah, so they'll face off with ECU in that first round, or in that opening game of the regional. Also, we'll have Virginia and Army in the regional. So it'll be a really fascinating East Coast group of teams to follow. But finally, before we get out of here, 7 Oklahoma Sooners were selected to D1Softball's All-American teams, including 5 first-teamers. Only one other school had multiple first-teamers, the Tennessee Volunteers. Of your first-teamers for Oklahoma, Jordy Ball, Kinsey Hansen, Alyssa Brito, Tiara Jennings, and Jada Coleman. Your second-teamers, Haley Lee and Grace Lyons. I feel like it's a fair representation of what Oklahoma was this year. So not necessarily surprised that, people were left off. I think you could probably make a case for Nicole May to be on one of these lists, although she wasn't kind of the dominating presence all year long, but she was really, really good. So yeah. Any thoughts on any of that, Josh?
Nicole May is it's obviously tough to see her left off just because it truly was a 3-person rotation for Oklahoma, and Nicole May would be seemingly as dominant as either of the other two. But all in all, I mean, a great representation for OU. I mean, when you get that many players recognized, 7, right? It's I mean, that's a hearty number. There's not a lot of programs. There's no other programs that are doing that. So it just, again, speaks to the dominance of this Oklahoma team that all of a sudden has a new all-time consecutive wins record in its back pocket as they cruise on into OKC.
Yeah, it's you can't have all of them. You can't get all the spots because just the way voting goes. But still, you'd like to see a player like Nicole May, who did have a career year in her 3rd season with the Sooners, have that kind of get that recognition. You know what I mean? Get the recognition for being one of the best pitchers in college softball this year. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. We appreciate you very, very much. Thanks for subscribing to the show wherever you get your podcasts and over on YouTube. Make sure you hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef. Follow me at John9Williams, and the show is at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, he's Josh, I'm John. Boomer Sooner.